So I want to get to what you found about interdisciplinary partnering and how, if that works and how it works. I'm biased and believe it does, and I'm sure you do as well. But I want to just ask the probably the obvious question. So you saw some horrible things, and you saw real disparities, and you experienced them as a child in two countries, not just one. How is it that a person comes out of that without bitterness, without anger towards the oppressive class or the oppressive people?
Well, it isn't that I came out of it without anger. I was very angry as I grew up, but I've been able to channel that anger. And I mean, if we're not angry, if we're not outraged at injustice and cruelty, there's something wrong.
Right, right, right.
So, but I was able to channel it in a constructive way. And I should add that that really didn't happen until another pivotal experience in my life, which was in the late 60s, when I woke up as if, along with thousands of other women, asleep from a long drug sleep, to realize that a lot of problems I thought were something is wrong with me, just personal problems, that they were really social problems because I shared them with all these other women.
Right.
And so I threw myself into the women's liberation movement of that time.
And so I'm guessing that Betty Friedan factored into your thinking. So she was the one that sort of discovered a hidden reality that all women, or many women, sensed something was missing in their lives. And it had to do not necessarily with the bad men, but it just had to do with this disconnection between who a woman was in her heart and soul and sort of how she felt she needed to act in public and how social norms were prescribed for women to act. Is that?
Well, I knew Betty, and I liked her, but no, she really didn't.
Okay.
What figured for me was something else. It was really that my training is not only in social and systems science, but also in law. And I became outraged. Excuse me.
You've got an awful cold. Thank
I've
you
got a
very
terrible
much for
cold.
joining us.
I became outraged at the discriminatory laws. And so I founded the first center on women in the law in the United States, the Los Angeles Women's Center Legal Program. And at that time, people would say, well, what does that mean, women in the law? But it wasn't on our radar. But what it meant was that as late as 1969, I had to write a friend of the court brief to the Supreme Court of the United States arguing the then radical idea that women should be considered persons under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause.
Thank you.
And, that is what drove me. I mean, this palpable injustice. But it was also something else. I wrote, I threw myself into this. I wrote two books, really on women and the law, one drawing from my experience as a family law attorney, the other one drawing from my experience on constitutional law. It was the only mass paperback on the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA handbook, the Equal Rights Handbook. But when that amendment failed, it became very clear that as essential as laws are, and there are places in the world today where we are still working like much of Southeast Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, doesn't even have laws on the books condemning violence against women and families. But as important as laws are, that what we're really talking about is the need for a cultural transformation. And then the question was, transformation from what to what? Because it was clear that right, left, you have terrible regimes on both sides. Religious, secular, the same. Capitalist, socialist, the same. Eastern, Western, the same. And so that really led me back to the questions of my childhood. And it was like, and I started a study using a methodology, the study of relational dynamics, which is very different from most studies of society, which are quite aptly called the study of man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're told, don't worry, man includes woman.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the English word woman includes man. But that's not the point. The point was that if you leave out of your database no less than half of humanity, you're not going to see the whole picture.
Right, right.
So you can't see the configuration of the picture. And what then happened is that it was possible using this gender holistic approach to connect the dots and to see something that I have written about, have spoken about at the United Nations General Assembly, at the State Department, because my job is to really get these ideas not only to the convinced, but to the people who have no clue.
And you create new language, is my take.
I do create
yes,
new language, and we
Why?
need new language for new thinking.
Right, right.
And basically my work shows that what's good for women is good for the world,
Right.
what's bad for women is bad for the world, and that as long as women are devalued, which they are in domination systems, which are these rigid rankings of man over man, man over woman, race over race, religion over religion.
Sort of binary systems.
Well, as long as that prevails, we are not going to have societies guided by caring values. Why? Because caring, caregiving, and nonviolence are in domination systems because we have very rigid gender stereotypes associated only with the subordinate, devalued women. And real men are not supposed to embrace them. So I began to really apply my training as a systems scientist and introduced, as you said, new language, because as long as we have these right-left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western categories, we don't have systems. None of them recognize the foundational importance in shaping nothing less than children's brains, as we know from neuroscience, of those foundational woman-man, parent-child, early relations. And that's what my work shows. So it's a gender holistic way of cultural transformation.